Imagine walking into a room where two people are having a heated argument about a chair. One sees it as blue, the other insists it's clearly green. Both are equally certain, both are looking at the exact same object, and both think the other person is completely wrong. Now, what if I told you that this isn't just a simple disagreement about colors? It's proof that reality as we know it might be a complete illusion. This isn't just some wild theory. It's the earth-shattering discovery of Ludwig Wittgenstein, a philosopher who started out designing airplane propellers and ended up proving that everything we think we know about reality is built on shifting sand. Picture this. In 1918, a brilliant young Austrian walks into Cambridge University thinking he's solved all of philosophy's problems. He's so confident that after publishing his first book, he quits philosophy entirely to become a village school teacher. That man was Ludwig Wittgenstein. But here's where it gets interesting. Years later, he realized he'd gotten everything completely wrong, and what he discovered next would shake the foundations of how we understand reality itself. You see, Wittgenstein noticed something nobody had ever truly grasped before. When you and I look at that blue or green chair, we're not really arguing about the chair at all. We're trapped in a game, a language game. And this game isn't just about chairs or colors. It's about everything. Every single thing you think you know, every fact you believe, every emotion you feel. They're all part of an intricate web of language games that we're playing without even realizing it. Think about this. Have you ever tried to explain what pain feels like to someone else? You might say, it's sharp or it's burning. But are you really describing the actual sensation? Or are you just using words that everyone has agreed mean pain? Wittgenstein would say it's the latter, and he proved it in a way that no one has ever been able to refute. But here's where it gets truly mind-bending. If our entire understanding of reality is built on these language games, what happens when the rules change? What happens when you step into a different culture with different language games? What they see as obviously true might be completely different from what you see as true, and neither of you would be wrong. You're just playing different games. This isn't just some abstract philosophical idea. It's happening right now, all around us. Every time you scroll through social media and see people seemingly living in completely different realities, arguing about facts that seem obvious to them but incomprehensible to others, you're witnessing Wittgenstein's discovery in action. The world isn't divided because people can't agree on reality. It's divided because we're all playing different language games and we don't even realize it. What Wittgenstein uncovered goes far beyond mere miscommunication. It strikes at the very heart of what we think reality is. And once you understand this, you'll never see the world, or your own thoughts, in quite the same way again. Let's dive into how Wittgenstein's discovery about language games completely transforms our understanding of reality. What makes his insight so revolutionary isn't just that he found problems with language. It's that he showed us why we can never escape these problems, no matter how hard we try. Take something as simple as pointing at an object and naming it. Seems straightforward, right? That's what most philosophers before Wittgenstein thought. But he showed us why this basic act is already part of a complex game we're playing. When a parent points to a dog and says dog to their child, they're not just connecting a word to a thing. They're initiating the child into a whole system of rules about how we use that word. Here's where it gets fascinating. Wittgenstein used a thought experiment called the beetle in the box to blow this whole idea wide open. Imagine everyone has a box, and inside each box is what they call a beetle. Nobody can look inside anyone else's box, they can only see their own beetle. Now, how do we know we're all talking about the same thing when we say beetle? The shocking answer is, we don't. And it doesn't even matter. This isn't just about beetles in boxes. This is about everything we think is private and personal. Our pains, our emotions, our thoughts. When you say I'm in pain, you're not actually describing some internal sensation. Instead, you're making a move in a language game that everyone around you understands. You're following rules you learned as a child about when and how to use the word pain. But wait, it gets even more mind-bending. Think about how we use words like know or understand. When someone says, I know it's true, what are they really doing? According to Wittgenstein, they're not describing some mental state of certainty. They're making a move in a language game that has specific consequences, like being held accountable if they're wrong. The implications are staggering. Every debate you've ever had about politics, religion, or even scientific facts isn't really about finding truth. It's about which language game you're playing and what rules you're following. When people seem to be living in completely different realities, they actually are, because they're playing different language games with different rules. This is why you can't win an argument just by showing someone facts. If you're playing chess and they're playing checkers, all the brilliant chess moves in the world won't matter. You're not even playing the same game. Wittgenstein's insight goes beyond just words and meaning. It reveals why our entire concept of having private thoughts or inner experiences might be an illusion. Everything we think is private and personal is actually shaped by the public language games we play. There's no inside that exists independently of the outside world of shared language and meaning. In the vast landscape of language games, there's one particularly fascinating aspect that Wittgenstein uncovered: the complete impossibility of having a truly private language. This might sound abstract at first, but it reveals something profound about how our minds work and why we can never truly escape the social nature of reality. Think about something intensely personal, like the specific way a sunset looks to you, or how your favorite song makes you feel. You might think these experiences are entirely private, locked away in your mind where no one else can access them. But Wittgenstein showed why this idea falls apart under scrutiny. Here's the mind-bending part. Try to imagine creating a completely private language to describe your inner experiences, one that only you understand. Maybe you create a special symbol to represent that unique feeling you get when watching the sunset. But how would you know, even for yourself, that you're using this symbol consistently, without any external reference point, without any way to check if you're following your own rules? The whole idea of meaning collapses. Wittgenstein used a brilliant example to illustrate this. Imagine trying to keep a diary of a sensation that only you can feel. You decide to call it S and write down when it occurs. But how do you know, the next time you feel something, that it's the same S as before? You might think you can just remember it, but here's the catch. Without any way to verify or check your memory against something external, you have no way to know if you're remembering correctly. This isn't just philosophical wordplay. It has massive implications for everything we think we know about consciousness, personal identity, and even mental health. When someone says they're depressed, they're not just describing a private feeling. They're participating in a shared language game that gives that experience meaning. This is why mental health symptoms often manifest differently across cultures. People are playing different language games about what counts as normal or disordered. The implications get even wilder when we think about modern technology. Social media, for instance, isn't just a platform for sharing thoughts. It's creating entirely new language games that shape how we experience reality. When someone posts about feeling FOMO or being triggered, they're not just describing pre-existing feelings. They're participating in new ways of organizing and understanding experience itself. This also explains why genuine innovation is so rare and difficult. You can't just invent new concepts out of thin air. They need to connect to existing language games in ways that others can understand and use. This is why real breakthroughs often come from finding new ways to combine or modify existing language games, rather than trying to create completely new ones. And here's where it gets practical. Understanding this can transform how you approach disagreements and misunderstandings. When someone seems to be speaking nonsense, they're probably not stupid or crazy. They're likely playing a different language game with different rules. The key isn't to prove them wrong, but to understand what game they're playing and why. When we talk about a form of life, we're not just using fancy philosophical jargon. Wittgenstein used this term to describe something that affects every single moment of your existence, the complete package of culture, practices, and shared understandings that make any kind of meaning possible in the first place. Let's get concrete about this. Think about how a teenager today uses the word cap. To them, saying no cap is a natural way to emphasize truth. But to someone from just a decade ago, this would sound completely nonsensical. This isn't just a cute example of slang. It reveals something profound about how meaning works. The word only makes sense within a specific form of life, a shared context of practices and understanding. But it goes way deeper than slang. Take something as basic as measuring time. When you say, "I'll meet you in an hour," you're not just referring to some objective chunk of time. You're participating in a complex form of life that includes clocks, schedules, and shared expectations about punctuality. In some cultures, time is understood completely differently. It's not a resource to be measured and spent, but a cycle to be experienced. Here's where it gets really interesting. Scientists working at the quantum level have discovered that the very act of observation changes what they're observing. Wittgenstein would say this isn't just true in quantum physics. It's true in everyday life. The way we observe and talk about reality actually shapes what reality is for us. When a physicist says an electron is both a wave and a particle, they're not describing some mysterious dual nature. They're showing how our language games break down at the quantum level. This has massive implications for things like artificial intelligence. When we try to create AI that understands language, we're not just teaching it words and grammar. We're trying to create a form of life that can participate in our language games. This is why AI often fails in such weird and unexpected ways. It's playing our language games without truly sharing our form of life. Think about social media bubbles. People aren't just disagreeing about facts. They're living in different forms of life, with different rules about what counts as evidence, what's considered funny, what's offensive, and what's worth caring about. When someone from one bubble encounters someone from another, it's not just a disagreement, it's a collision of different forms of life. And here's something even more mind-bending. These forms of life aren't static. They're constantly evolving, splitting, merging, and creating new possibilities for meaning. Every new technology, every viral meme, every cultural shift creates new ways of making sense of the world. We're not just playing language games. We're constantly inventing new ones. This also explains why translation between languages is so much more complex than just swapping words. When you translate between languages, you're not just converting words. You're trying to bridge different forms of life. Some concepts simply don't translate because they depend on forms of life that don't exist in the target language. The rules we live by aren't just abstract guidelines. They're the invisible architecture of our reality. And Wittgenstein showed us something mind-blowing. These rules aren't just about language. They're about everything we think, feel, and believe is real. Think about color for a moment. The Russian language has two distinct words for what English speakers call blue. Sini for dark blue and голубой for light blue. They're as different to Russian speakers as red and pink are to English speakers. This isn't just a quirk of vocabulary. Research shows Russian speakers actually perceive these colors differently. Their language game literally shapes what they see. But here's where it gets even more fascinating. These rules shape not just what we see, but how we think. Take the Gugu Yimithir people of Australia. Their language doesn't use relative directions like left or right. Instead, they use absolute directions, north, south, east, west, for everything. As a result, they develop an almost superhuman sense of direction. Their language game literally rewires their spatial awareness. Now, let's talk about something that hits closer to home: arguments on social media. When people seem to be talking past each other about politics or culture, they're not just disagreeing, they're playing by completely different rules. One person might be playing a game where truth is about personal experience, while another is playing a game where only scientific studies count. No wonder they can't agree. The digital age has created entirely new rule sets. Think about how literally now often means figuratively, or how adding "s" can completely reverse the meaning of a statement. These aren't just changes in language. They're new rules for understanding reality itself. Here's something that'll really bake your noodle. Even the rules about how we break rules are part of the game. When a poet breaks grammar rules for effect, or when a comedian subverts expectations for a laugh, they're not really breaking the rules. They're following higher-level rules about how and when rules can be broken. Wittgenstein showed us that there's no stepping outside these rules to see real reality. Every attempt to do so just creates new rules, new games. It's like trying to jump out of your own shadow. The very act of jumping creates a new shadow. This has huge implications for things like psychedelics and meditation, which promise to show us reality as it really is. But even these experiences are interpreted through language games. When someone describes a mystical experience, they're not describing raw reality. They're playing a specific language game about mystical experiences. And here's the kicker. Understanding this doesn't make the rules any less real or binding. Just because money is a language game doesn't mean you can stop paying your bills. These games are what reality is made of. There's no more real reality hiding behind them. Breaking free from language games might seem impossible, and in a way Wittgenstein proved that it is. But understanding this doesn't trap us. It opens up entirely new possibilities for how we can navigate our reality. Think about Neo in The Matrix. Once he understood the rules of his reality, he could bend them. Similarly, understanding that we're playing language games doesn't let us escape them, but it gives us the power to play them more consciously. It's like being a lucid dreamer in a dream you can't wake up from. You're still dreaming, but now you know it's a dream. Here's where things get really interesting. The technology we're creating is starting to blur the lines between different language games in unprecedented ways. Take emojis. They're creating a new kind of universal language game that transcends cultural boundaries. It means pretty much the same thing whether you're in New York or New Delhi. But even this universal language is part of a specific form of life, one that assumes access to smartphones and understanding of digital communication. Social media is creating what Wittgenstein never could have imagined. Hybrid language games that exist simultaneously in multiple forms of life. When a meme goes viral, it creates instant shared meaning across different cultures and languages. But here's the twist. Each culture might interpret it slightly differently, creating a kind of quantum superposition of meanings. This brings us back to our original paradox. If reality is just a set of language games, how can we ever know what's really real? But Wittgenstein's insight flips this question on its head. The language games aren't hiding reality from us. They are reality. The chair isn't blue or green in reality. Its color exists only within the language game we're playing about color. Understanding this changes everything. Those heated arguments about politics, religion, or whether a hot dog is a sandwich, they're not about discovering the truth. They're about which language game we choose to play. And choosing consciously is very different from being unconsciously played by the game. So where does this leave us? With a choice. We can keep playing our language games unconsciously, getting frustrated when others don't play by our rules. Or we can become conscious players, understanding that every word we speak, every fact we believe, every emotion we feel is part of an intricate game that we're all playing together. Next time you find yourself in an argument that seems impossible to resolve, remember, you might not be disagreeing about facts. You might be playing different games. And the first step to resolving any conflict might be simply asking, what game are we playing here? Because in the end, Wittgenstein's discovery doesn't invalidate reality. It shows us what reality really is. And once you see it, you can never unsee it. The question isn't whether you're playing language games, it's whether you're playing them consciously or unconsciously, skillfully or clumsily, rigidly or creatively. The game is always on. The only question is, how do you want to play? Let me wrap this up by returning to that argument about the chair's color we started with. But now, after understanding Wittgenstein's earth-shattering insights, we can see it wasn't just about color at all. It was about the entire way we construct our reality through language. Think about every argument you've ever had. Every time you felt completely certain you were right and someone else was wrong. What if those weren't conflicts about reality, but collisions between different language games? This isn't just some philosophical curiosity. It's a key that can unlock better relationships, more effective communication, and a deeper understanding of why our world seems to be fracturing into different realities. Wittgenstein didn't just discover a quirk of language. He uncovered the operating system of human reality itself. And once you see it, everything changes. Those social media arguments that seem to go nowhere, they're not failures of logic. They're inevitable collisions between different language games. That feeling of not being understood? It's not because you're explaining it wrong. It's because you and your listener are playing different games. But here's the truly transformative part. Understanding this gives you a superpower. When you know you're playing a language game, you can choose how to play it. You can switch games when needed. You can understand why others play different games. You're no longer just a piece on the board. You become a conscious player. So next time you find yourself absolutely certain about something, pause for a moment. Ask yourself, what game am I playing? What are its rules? What games are others playing? This simple shift in perspective might just change everything, because in the end, Wittgenstein showed us that there's no escaping language games. They're what reality is made of. The only question is, will you be played by the game, or will you learn to play it consciously? And maybe, just maybe, that blue-green chair isn't actually either color. Maybe it's a reminder that every time we open our mouths to speak, we're not just describing reality, we're creating it.